On today's Newsmakers, Meta's about face, persecution, and a mother's grief. That and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each and every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable figures. On today's Newsmakers, we start with a tragedy. Kathy Tenedorio is living a mother's worst nightmare after her son, Matthew, was killed during the New Year's Day terror attack in New Orleans. She joins us to talk about her faith and forgiveness, and she's here with her sister, Linda Fleck. Let's welcome them to Newsmakers. Well, Kathy and Linda, I really appreciate you joining me. I know it has been a very difficult almost week and a half now since the New Orleans terror attack. Kathy, this attack claimed the life of your son, Matthew. And I want to start, before we get into the details of what happened, there's a lot to talk about. I want you to tell us a little bit about Matt. And Linda, you can as well, but I'll start with you, Kathy. Who was Matt? Give us a sense of who he was.
He was just a wonderful, beautiful baby, big baby. My others were normal-sized babies. He was just almost 10 pounds. So right from the start, he was, in my eyes, a star. He just was a happy kid. You know, he was very expressive. He was very particular.
Meticulous.
Yes, yep. Very meticulous. Didn't like his hands wet, just
dirty,
things like that, or dirty. Didn't like the snow when we lived up in New York. If he got his hands wet, he freaked out. Anyway, but he had dreams. He wanted to be a pilot. We researched different schools and the cost, and he liked Embry-Riddle and Daytona Beach area, but I said, we need to move you there, become a resident. We had all these discussions, these little sweet memories that I have of him. And, he just, of course, he played video games, and he liked to skateboard. He had a big German Shepherd named Brutus, and he would skate like longboard, where you skate and the dog pulls you around the whole neighborhood. And the sweetest thing, my neighbor made a blanket for him with German Shepherd dogs all over it, because she just would see him walking that dog every day, 3-4 times a day. Mm-hmm. I think that's so sweet. He was just a wonderful, wonderful person.
Yeah, the dog's still looking for him.
Yes.
Oh,
Brutus doesn't understand that Matthew's not coming home.
Right.
And they're very devoted dogs, German Shepherds. They're very devoted dogs.
Yeah.
And
very loyal. Yes. Very, very
loyal. Linda, you're Matthew's aunt, and from your perspective, what has this been like? I mean, the last 9 days for you, as we're speaking about this, we're 9 days past this event. How have you been processing this?
It's been very hard. I'm very emotional, and I feel bad for my sister and my brother-in-law and their 2 brothers that they've had to go through this. I think I go through different emotions of grief. I get upset, I cry, and then I get angry about, why that there was no protection where he was. Other things, we want answers, how he really died, because still we're unsure. And until we see the autopsy report, her and I did go see Matthew at the funeral home before he's made up. And so we just have some questions. And I mean,
my husband can't go see him.
No. And we're just all heartbroken. It's been very, very hard. But through God and through the Lord, I've just been really praying, and I've been spending time in the Word. And when I get really, really upset, I just go to the Word and just pray and ask God to help me. That's the only, without our faith, I don't know how people do it. Yeah. This is
Can I say something about that? Because the fact that you just brought that up, I think it's so, what you just said, these normal emotions, these questions, the frustration and anger that we have as human beings when something like this happens, and you want those answers, and that's normal and human. And then what you said was so powerful that when you're feeling that, you go back to scripture, you go back into the word, you turn
That's
to
what I've been
prayer,
doing.
and
Yeah.
that's the solution. And for you, Kathy, as you've been navigating this, how has your faith sustained you?
My faith is strengthened. My faith, my life is going to be forever changed. I'm going to be able to help more people than I already help, because that's my whole goal in life, is to help people. That's
Well, I know
all I
you're the
want
rock
to
for a
do,
lot of
ever want
people.
to do. I've had people reach out to me and remind me, remember when you helped me? Do you remember when? I didn't have totally forgot about it, but they didn't forget about it. And it's so beautiful to touch each other's hearts. That's the most important thing. Do what Jesus did. Serve.
Well, and I've had a number of conversations with you, and I've also talked to another family member who has talked about how, Kathy, you have served and been there for others, and that you've been the rock for so many other people. And when the tables turn in this way, that's sometimes difficult to now be the one to be ministered to, but important to allow
I have
yourself
to
to
allow it. I
receive
have
that
to allow it
help.
because it's
Right.
important,
Right.
for my own well-being. And my husband, he's so broken. Matthew, he said all of my hopes and dreams are gone.
We keep
But he
telling
didn't
him.
mean that.
Yeah,
He
we
didn't
keep
mean,
telling him no.
But he worked with Matthew. They worked side by side. He was kind of mentoring him, and bringing him along. Trying to have him work and have a good career, and just that you always want that for your children, to be successful, find themselves.
And we're going to be praying for you. We're going to be praying for you. And I know everybody watching and listening, they will be adding you to prayer lists, and we'll be keeping in touch with you as this journey unfolds. I want to just commend you both for the bravery. I don't think people realize how difficult it is in the middle of something like this to get on a camera and talk about the most painful thing you've ever experienced. So I thank you both for doing that and for showing your faith to so many today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please continue to pray for the Tenedorio family as they navigate loss. We'll be right back with more Newsmakers in a moment. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Next up, Christian persecution is continuing to worsen across the globe. Jeff King, president of International Christian Concern, joins us to break the issue down and to shed light on his new 2025 Global Persecution Index. Let's welcome Jeff to Newsmakers. Jeff King, a lot to break down today about your 2025 Global Persecution Index. Now, before we get into the results and the report, with International Christian Concern, you put this report out. It's 116 pages, a lot of content. For those who don't know, what is the purpose of the Global Persecution Index?
Yeah, well, Billy, thanks for asking it. Global persecution is a complicated subject. I've been doing it for forever, but I realize when I talk to decision makers on Capitol Hill or journalists, a journalist has to cover so much, right? And so then to, try to become an expert on persecution is very hard. It takes a long time. So we produce the report so kind of those decision makers or journalists can go fast forward and quickly grasp a very complex issue and understand the where and the why and the how of persecution.
Yeah, and this is, as you said, very complex. You and I have spoken many times. I mean, you could spend hours talking about one particular country even and what is going on inside that country. And in this report, you're looking all across the globe, every corner of the globe, at what is going on. How did you collect the data? What is that process like before we get into what you found?
Yeah. So we have staff all over the world, first of all. So they're feeding us back news of what's going on in their countries and what are the trends and what are the incidents and what really is persecution and what's something else. And then we've got a team of fellows too. And these are academics and different people. And then we've got our regular staff, and they're analyzing the news and taking in from staff around the world and posting news all the time. So we're constantly monitoring and watching and to see what's happening where, because we have to respond. We have to get in there and aid victims. So our ear is always to the ground, and then we're outputting it in news, and then the academics are writing reports. And then at the end of the year, we just kind of pull all that together and do a very deep dive and do a survey and say, hey, what's the cream of the crop? Although it's not cream at all, right? But what are the top issues? And so we just kind of parse it that way.
From a 30,000 foot view, people will ask the question, okay, well, when you live in America, especially, it's 2025 now. How could these horrific things really be happening? How many of them are really going on? What would you say to those who would say, what are the trends looking like around the world? Are things getting better? Are they getting worse when it comes to persecution?
Yeah, I'd say I think they just continue to get worse. It's been a slow burn worse for a very long time. You just take the biggest country and the biggest group of people that are persecuted around the world. Just look at China. So you've got a massive, massive number of Christians. And, starting with the rise of President Xi, he just went into Mao mode and major crackdown on Christians. So that continues. That hasn't let up. But that's been going on for a few years. But then more recently, we've got Syria, and the group that took over a huge swath of Syria very quickly is Al-Qaeda and ISIS. That's who these guys are. They're called HTS, but that's just, they did a name change. They did a rebranding, as it were. And these guys are the worst of the worst. Now, they're very politically savvy. They're very journalism savvy. They're advised by Turkey's intel people. And so, when they get on camera, it's like, we are not going to have a problem with Christians. My gosh, we're modern, we're tolerant. And it's like, oh my gosh, all you have to do is understand who these players are and what their past is. And the leopard doesn't change a spot. So that's Syria. You've also got Ukraine. Russia destroyed hundreds of churches, Ukrainian churches, and heritage sites. And so that was very disturbing. And then you've got all the usual places like India and Egypt and just all over the world, North Korea, Nigeria. It's absolutely horrible situation, but it just goes on and on. It's not necessarily new, but it's terrible.
At the end of the day, this report, the 2025 Global Persecution Index, incredibly important. Where can people go if they want to get a copy of it, if they want to read it?
Yeah, it's persecution.org/GPI, or you can just go to persecution.org and go up to the top and look at reports. And then also get our newsletter. So our newsletter is a magazine. It's about persecution. I think that's the most important thing. That people, in this day and age, there's so much coming at you. You're not going to be aware unless there's information being shown to you what's going on with your brother and sister. So sign up for our magazine called Persecution.
Well, I so appreciate you breaking it down. We have a lot to pray for the persecuted church around the world. And I appreciate the work you're doing to highlight everything that people are going through. And that, I think, again, inspires us all to think deeply about our brothers and sisters in Christ and to be praying for them. Thank you for your time today.
So good to be with you, Billy. Thank you.
For more information on this year's Global Persecution Index, go to persecution.org. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, we are sitting down with Jacob Hubert. He's the president of Liberty Justice Center, and he's here to explore Mark Zuckerberg and Meta's recent pledge to stop censorship and to allow free speech on their platforms. Let's welcome Jacob to Newsmakers. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today. Big news out of Meta announcing some sweeping changes to how they handle content, essentially a pledge to crack down on the censorship that we now know has been unfolding on social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and others. What did you make of this announcement?
Well, it seems like we're coming to the end of an era here as the Biden administration comes to a close. The Biden administration and even a little bit before that was a period marked by heavy-handed governmental efforts to censor content on social media. And now I think that the whole era of censorship is coming to an end. I think there's market pressure coming from X, where people are flocking so that they could speak freely without having to worry about having their posts deleted or their accounts suspended or being banned completely for saying the wrong thing. I think he wants people to come back to Facebook who have flocked over there. And I think he also probably realizes that government pressure to censor is going to go away. It abated somewhat over the course of the Biden years, and now President Trump has a very different attitude toward freedom of speech online. And so everybody's starting a new era, it seems like. That would really close the book on this whole period of Biden administration censorship that we've had and make the social media platforms the public square, the forum for free speech that I think most people want them to be.
Why do you think this sudden change of heart? Now, you mentioned the market pressure, but my concern is more, why were they so willing to do it in the first place?
Right. So I think there was government influence and pressure combined with, I think, the natural tendency of some employees of these companies to censor ideas that they don't like, all coming together to result in a very oppressive environment for a number of years there. And of course, we saw an oppressive environment across many facets of society early in the COVID era, and this is just one of them. And now that's seems like a rather distant memory to a lot of people. And the demand for free speech has been shown both in the market and in the election, where people voted for the candidate who presented himself as the free speech candidate. And so I think that primarily is what accounts for the change.
Well, and what you just said there is very important, because when you go and you watch Zuckerberg talking about this, right, you can read the release, but when you watch the video, it's about a 5-minute video of him explaining these changes. He talks about the cautions, like, hey, we're going to miss some things. There are going to be some things that now stay up, that you might not like, but they feel like this is the right way to go. He makes it very clear at one point. He says the election, and I guess I'll paraphrase it, was a turning point that showed, a tipping point that showed that free speech needed to be respected more, essentially. And I thought that was a very interesting admission from him. Not a lot of people would openly say that if they feel like they've made mistakes in how they've handled censorship. When you saw that part of it or heard that part of it, where he actually said the election was tied essentially to this decision, what were you thinking?
Well, I mean, one thing that occurs to me is it makes sense for someone like him in a big business that could face threats of regulation from either party. I mean, they have faced threats at the federal level from Democrats lately, state level from Republicans, to try to get along with whoever's in power. And the way to get along with the Democrats when Biden took office was to do censorship. And the way to get along now, it seems, is to have more open communication. So is this a change of heart? Is this more like just reading the room and the political climate and doing what's going to be best for Facebook? Well, I don't know the man, so I can't say for sure, but I can say that it's going to be hard to trust Zuckerberg on this anytime soon, as someone who was involved in suing Facebook over censorship and seeing how they fought tooth and nail to defend what they did, and to, they mass censored people, banned people from these platforms, and then refused to be held accountable in court. And now, only much later, after some people were seriously harmed by not being able to get their message out or conduct their business online anymore in the major platforms, now they come back and say they've had a change of heart. Well, that's great. And, if it continues, then maybe someday we could have some trust there. Till then, it's hard to trust, but we can appreciate it as far as it goes for now.
Okay, so let's talk before we go about TikTok. This is a big case, obviously. And again, this is one I think a lot of people don't know a lot about it. They've heard of dangers of TikTok being owned by a company in China, the Chinese government potentially having access, fears over what that means. And then obviously proposals in the US, which this is not a new issue. It's been going on for a few years now, to try and ban TikTok in the US or somehow force the sale. Take us through the case and what you're hoping to see happen.
So back in April, President Biden signed a law that effectively bans TikTok. It says that essentially if TikTok is going to be offered in the U.S., then the company providing it in the U.S. has to be completely separate from from communist China and from any other foreign adversary. The parent of TikTok, ByteDance, which has its offices in Beijing, has to divest itself of U.S. TikTok, and that has to be totally separate, independent, not use their algorithm or anything. And that TikTok has said that as a practical matter, that's just not feasible. There was a 270-day deadline, which happens to end on January 19th, the day before President Trump takes office, for that to happen. And TikTok has said, that's not feasible. We couldn't do it that fast, and we can't really do it at all because TikTok is a global platform, and what makes it so special and useful to people is this content recommendation engine that's based in China and updated there. And if you sever the platform from that, it's just not TikTok anymore. It's something else. And so it amounts to a ban. And then what the law also gives the president the authority in the future to say that any other social media platform that's large is controlled by a foreign adversary and a threat to national security, and to unilaterally ban that platform. So we were very disturbed by this law. And really, this whole thing is of a piece with this censorship of speech online that we've been seeing for the past 4 years. And we're hopeful that the Supreme Court will help bring that era to an end by shutting this down. And President Trump has said that he is going to figure out how to address the national security concerns while respecting free speech. And so we're hopeful that he'll do that.
Well, I so appreciate you breaking that down. That is going to be a big case to watch. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me.
CBN News will continue to cover Meta and its current about face as the Trump administration is coming in. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel for the full interviews you saw on today's episode. Plus, you can check out our new daily Newsmakers podcast. We feature one full interview every single day. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. As for this show, we'll see you again next week.